Hi, my name is Gary, and today I'll be tying for you the GForce. The GForce is a pattern I developed to imitate Baetis mayflies. It's a generic pattern that imitates most Baetis, but it also can be used to cover other mayfly species. I pretty much fish it in the exclusion of most other mayflies, and it's quite a simple pattern, very durable. You can modify it, and I'm a big fan of flies that can be modified on the water to imitate other things. So by minor modifications, you can convert it to a midge pattern. The pattern evolved from a lot of other patterns and thoughts that I had talking to friends and fishing other patterns. It's been through a number of incarnations. Currently, the one that I'm fishing, I'm very happy with. It's very, very durable. Looks good in the water, has a lot of triggers, and is a very effective pattern. From a material perspective, it's quite simple. There's not a single natural material in it. If we talk hooks, I tend to fish a Dohiko 302 as a nymph hook for it, sizes 14 through 20. Beads, the classic GForce uses glass beads. These are silver lined glass, or in the case of the one I'll be tying tonight, it's a copper lined glass bead. You can find these from bead shops, and if you look at the actual instructions, it'll give you the sizes. Tying instructions will give you the sizes of the bead to be used. From a practical perspective, it's tied body-wise using flashabou. In this case, it's a saltwater flashabou, but it's a UV flashabou, which adds a UV trigger to the pattern. That's colored with a permanent marker. Your choice of color. I've been quite particular when it comes to my brown ones that this is the brown color that I prefer. It happens to be a Prisma marker. We rivet with some wire. That's also quite specific. I'm a fan of the UTC gold wire for that. It's going to have a hot spot on the butt, though you can do one on the collar. This is hot fluorescent orange. It looks closer to red, but it's actually kind of a dark orange. So the hot spots being on the butt or being behind the bead acts as a trigger, and it's quite common in a lot of the competition flies, and I think it adds something else to the pattern. I tie a lot with super glue. That's to make sure that things don't come apart. When I apply weighted beads and lead to a fly, I use super glue on that. When I whip finish, I whip finish with super glue to make sure the fly doesn't come apart. The thread I'll be using is called Nano Silk. It's a really, really nice thread. It's a gel spun polyethylene, and you pretty much can't break it. You can fray it, but you pretty much can't break it. You'll bend the hook before you break it. It's really fine, really flat, lies flat, spins well. Only downside is it tends to cut deer hair, so you need to use something else with a thicker thread for that. Tailing for the fly will actually be organza. So this comes from a material shop. The funny thing about organza, and I'll get a bit more into it in detail, is that depending on the type of organza, you get different fibers running different directions. Some of them can be the same color, but often you've got thicker fibers running one direction and thinner fibers running the other direction. So depending on the size of the fly you're tying, you'll either choose to use the thin organza or the thick organza out of the swatch. Dubbing for the fly, I use a hairline UV ice olive brown, which for me is a very good peacock color, but the only part of the fly that's dubbed is the thorax. The back of the fly is covered in Diamond Fine, Deer Creek Diamond Fine UV resin, and that's cured with a UV resin curing torch. In this case, it's a laser. If you remove the diffuser, you can see it's a pretty intense light. The nice thing about the Deer Creek products is they dry completely tack-free, completely clear, and using the laser dries in less than 2 seconds. So this makes the fly pretty much impervious to trout's teeth, and adds another UV element to the back of the fly. But we'll get into more details when we actually tie in the fly. Okay, I'm using a copper lined glass bead in this case, and I use some quality beads called Miyuki. I get them from a good bead shop. The nice thing about the metallic line beads, be it gold, silver or copper, is they've got a very nice bright shine which comes through. They don't add too much weight to the pattern, but they've got a good sheen. I use white thread on all the patterns, pretty much all my patterns except for the odd Stillwater pattern. The advantage of white thread is that it doesn't make your fly any darker, and your natural materials shine through. I'm going to use 6 strands of organza for the tail and the legs for this fly. Now, mayflies have 3 tails, but the 6 looks correct and balanced to me. I'm going to advance the thread towards the head. I'm not going to clip the butts because those are going to become our legs. Right. Now, if you plan your flies, you can actually tie them quite well, and I've planned this one multiple times, tying hundreds of them. So it's tails in, and then wire ribbing down the side. This creates a slightly wider fly, and let's be honest, a mayfly is not round, it's flattened top and sides, so it's wider on the side than it is on top and bottom, so the rib down the side helps with that. Once you've tied in the wire rib, you then tie in the hotspot. Now you can use a hotspot behind the bead, or you can use a hotspot on the butt. I'm quite partial to a butt hotspot. The advantage of a butt hotspot is that it spooks less fish, especially when the fish have been fished for a lot. It's a little more subtle than the other one. So you tie it in. This is a hot fluorescent thread. I'm using a hot fluorescent orange. Hotspot to size, whatever feels comfortable for you. Trap it down with a nano and clip it off. Right, so once we've got the hotspot tied in, we're now going to tie in the flash. Now, the flash is pretty fine, but it's pretty strong. You can stretch it, and just be careful during the tying. You don't want to stretch it while you're tying it. You want to either stretch it beforehand or get a thinner one as per the tying instructions for tying smaller flies. So that's tied in, and then overlapping turns going forward. Now, you can't see too much of it other than the flash is very subtle, but it has a UV element, and that's one of the main triggers in the fly, is this UV flashaboo. It doesn't look like much, but once you actually color it, as we're about to do, you get a great effect. Right. My Scottish nature won't let me throw anything away. I color the top and sides of the flashaboo. I don't color the underside because mayflies are lighter on the underside than on the top. The other advantage of using the white thread is that you actually can properly color this and you don't get a fly that's too dark. So here you can see the big advantage of using white threads in your fly. Also makes my travels a lot easier because I don't have to take 50 million threads with me when I go somewhere. And now we're going to rib one turn around the base of the tails, and then whatever feels good to you when it comes to wrapping forward. Bigger flies generally have 4 or 5 wraps, smaller flies more likely 3 or 4 wraps. Wrap that forward, pull the flash back, a couple of wraps in front of the flash, touching turns there. This is not essential. The fly is not designed to be weighted. Apply the appropriate amount of dubbing to the thread. I like the legs to come up the front of the dubbing rather than the back. I think it looks more natural and the legs stand more proud. So you need to make sure that you keep the legs out the way facing forward while you wrap turns of dubbing behind them. And then towards the end, once you've got a small but compact thorax, you want 1 or 2 wraps of dubbing in front of the legs. Now I've got six here. On the bigger fly I use 6 strands of organza, so I'll split 3 legs each side. On the smaller patterns we tend to go no legs if you don't want to worry with legs, or else I'll use 4 strands of organza and I will then tie 2 legs each side. So you split the legs, a wrap forward to pull that one back, a wrap forward to pull that one back. I'll pull off most of the extra stubbing, spin it in and tie it down. Trim anything that's a little too long, possibly a little bulky. So I've got my legs there sticking out sort of 45 degrees. I'm now going to pull the wing case forward. You don't have to put a wing case in the pattern, but for me it helps keep the legs down. I like wing cases on my flies, and if you don't like a wing case you can always cut it off. I always feel you can't add a wing case, so rather have it there and chop it off if you don't want it than want it and not have it. Right, the flash is cut off. Now I will use the permanent marker on the thread to whip finish. So color the thread with the permanent marker again. Super glue whip finish. Brush applicator makes life a lot easier. I'll do a 3 turn plus a single turn. Always double whip finish, but I've kind of reduced the amount of turns I do. Trim that. Right, trim your legs. Trim them overly long to start with, because again, you measure once, measure twice, cut once. Rather have them a little too long and cut them shorter than cutting them too short. Again, this is an optional step. You don't really have to put legs on it, and I just think they look nice. When you're tying for fun, you do lots of things. Right. trim anything else that needs a bit of trimming before we're going to put the resin on the fly, because the resin will seal a lot of the fly. Okay. Right, now we're going to use the UV resin, and we're going to coat the top of the fly and the wing case. We're not going to coat the underside. We're going to just put it along the top, spread it along there, get it into those grooves in the ribbing, smooth it out over the wing case. This pretty much gives a nice UV effect on the top of the fly, as well as makes it impervious to trout's teeth, because they really cannot chew through this. If you don't do this step, often what happens is trout eventually, if you're supposed to be catching lots of them like you will on this pattern, you're going to find that they will actually wear through that wire, and when the wire goes, your pattern starts coming undone. Alright, I said this thing works really well. It literally is 2 seconds to cure. I'll do sides, top, sides, and we're done. So that is now cured. I always offset my hooks, so I will push the fly away from myself slightly just to offset the hook point. I think this gives you a better hookup. Doesn't have to be extreme, but you want to see a noticeable offset when you look at the fly from the underside. And that is the GForce.